All righty.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad you're warm and at home. And thanks for being so flexible to pivot to Zoom at the last minute. We are so lucky to have Kelly G. Loeb with us for today's presentation and for the next 3 Fridays. She is going to really take us through the latest research and strategies and so forth, and dealing with something that I think is on, no joke, not a pun, on everybody's mind. I think every one of us knows someone or is related
Mhm.
to someone or has lost someone
That's some
to Alzheimer's, and so we're going to learn all about that today. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about Callie, and then I'm going to let her take over. She provides education, resources, and support for people experiencing, and I love this phrase, experiencing cognitive change, which is a lovely way to look at it. Cognitive change, or their families or caregivers and the general public. She is a California girl. That is why we took pity on her and said, we're happy to not make you come out from Kansas City in this. She holds a master's in social work from KU, and her quote is that she loves both sides of the state line. So we feel very well loved by her. I heard her first at a conference for librarians seeking to serve older populations. She's a very great presenter. And she brings a lot of experience and a great heart to her work. And I'm going to quote her. She works in honor of her grandmothers, Grace and Naomi, both of whom had Alzheimer's. And she further says she looks forward to the day when Alzheimer's disease is just a memory. Don't we all? So I'm going to mute myself and tell you to go to the corner there and see Kelly, and she will get the ball rolling for us today. She is open to questions. She's been presenting for quite some time. So she's open for questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat box and she'll handle them as they come up. And we'll also have, as we're going along, if you'd like to write down a question, we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So thanks for being here today, virtually. And let's listen to Kelly. Thank you all.
wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. I will take both the credit and the blame for shifting to Zoom for today. I am born and raised in Los Angeles, California, where the weather is much better than this most of the time. And I really do want to say my heart is there, especially now with all the fires that are happening. I'm very fortunate that my family and friends are not in the fire zone, although my mom did take some pictures on a clear day, which is a bit rare in Los Angeles because of all the smog. But on a clear day from my parents' backyard, you can see the Hollywood sign. And my mom sent some pictures the other day with all the smoke in the air from the fires, and you cannot see the Hollywood sign. And I've sort of avoided reading a lot of the reports because it just makes my heart ache. But I understand the Hollywood Hills are in danger. I hope that sign isn't that. I feel a little silly saying that, but I hope that sign makes it because it's so representative of what a wonderful place that is. So anyway, please forgive me that little detour thinking about my home. Although, as Laurel mentioned, I've been in the Alzheimer's field for 24 years. All 24 of those years have been here in Kansas City. I've lived in Kansas City for 31 years this year. And Alzheimer's has always been my passion. I didn't know it until I started working in the field. And if you had told me 24 years ago that I'd still be doing this, I'd say, no way, we're going to have a cure by then. We don't have a cure yet. I'm going to say more about that. But it's coming, and it's coming in large part thanks to organizations like Lawrence Public Library being willing to get the word out, and to people like you who are willing to come and hear the word, and to people who are willing to participate with us in research so that we can find out a lot of the things that I'm about to tell you. So, as Laurel said, please feel free to ask questions. use the chat feature. I will keep one eye on that, one eye on my screen. And if I had a third eye, then I'd do something with that one. But I'll pay attention to the chat. Thank you, Kathleen, for advancing the slide. If you feel moved to unmute yourself and ask your question out loud, feel free to do that. In 24 years of presenting about Alzheimer's, I've learned that when you get a thought in your head, sometimes you got to get it out right away. It might not stay. So feel free to say, "Ooh, I really need to ask this right now." I reserve the right to say, "Hang on, that's coming." And use the chat, and we'll get hopefully all your questions answered. And then Laurel and Kathleen have these slides available to send by email. So don't feel too burdened to take a lot of notes if you don't want to, because you'll get the slides by email if you like. And this is being recorded. So with that said, we're going to move right along. And I realize that that font is criminally small. Sorry about that. That's just a list, though, of all the things we're going to cover today and in the next 3 sessions. So we can skip that page. The font is much bigger on the subsequent pages. All right. So our first session today, and I want you to know before I continue, is that I've been teaching this class that we're engaging in now for the next 4 weeks. I've been teaching this class for 24 years. And the first time I ever went to this class, I went to one session, and the next one they said, "Okay, you're going to present." And I've learned that one of the best ways to learn something is to tell somebody else about it, is to teach it. The good news for you all is that I've grown a lot in 24 years, and I know a lot more. But I've done this for a while. I learn something new every time I present it. I probably will have at least one light bulb moment today. And that is something that is so wonderful about sharing information. So we're going to start with, I think the title of today's class was Help Me Understand. So we're going to go to the very fundamental information, that is, what is Alzheimer's disease anyway? As Laurel mentioned, it's something we're all aware of. We all know somebody that's got it. We're all probably in some way concerned that we will get it. I hope that's not too forward to tell you that. I'm in a very interesting position working for an Alzheimer's disease research center, in that I know probably more than your average bear about Alzheimer's disease. I know the risk factors, which I'm going to tell you about. I know a lot of stuff. So I think, oh, I'm never going to get that. But I'm not that naive. I also know that the likelihood of my getting it is not zero. And here's the thing, everybody. If you have a brain, you are at risk of having Alzheimer's disease. I hope that doesn't terrify anybody. There's nothing that I'm going to tell you today that is intended to terrify you. It is intended to get your attention. It is intended to inform you and to empower you to find out what next steps you might need to take. And whether you're here because you're curious about this diagnosis for yourself or a loved one, or for some other reason, I hope you'll find something useful. Today's today's session is really going to focus on what is dementia, and what do we know, what do we still need to know. The next couple of sessions will be more caregiver focused, some strategies and some ideas for when you are caring for someone who is, as Laurel mentioned, experiencing cognitive change. And then the final session will be about some community resources that will be scaffolding for you. You're welcome to come to all 4 sessions. Just 1 or 2, we are recording. They will be available. I'm hoping that I will be able to get to you in person at least for the next sessions, but I think we probably can make it, tell me if I'm wrong, Laurel and Kathleen, that all of them will be recorded and folks can still attend on Zoom, even if they choose not to get out of their house. I'm better in person. I can see you right now. I can only see about 6 of you, and I like to see everybody. And some of you might be able to tell I'm a colorful person, and I have my sparkly pants on today. And I'm very sad that nobody can see my sparkly pants. So I'll have to impress you with my knowledge rather than my outfit. All right. So what is Alzheimer's disease? Kathleen, you can go ahead and click the next button, please. So Alzheimer's disease is a progressive and fatal disease that currently has no cure. And Dell, your question, what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? We are going to talk about it on this very slide, so hang on. So overall, Alzheimer's is a disease. It is a diagnosis. It is a physiological condition. And we know a heck of a lot more about Alzheimer's disease than we did 24 years ago. We know legions more about Alzheimer's disease than we did back in 1906 when Dr. Alois Alzheimer, I suppose the correct language is discovered or recognized or identified Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease has been a known entity since at least 1906. It's probably been a thing for as long as humans have existed. But of course, we have advanced in terms of technology and medicine over that 100, almost 120 years. Dell, I promise I'm getting to your question. I want to say for sure, I want to make you know, I want you to remember everything I tell you. That's your task for today and the next 3 weeks. Every single thing I tell you is important, except maybe that I'm wearing sparkly pants. You don't have to really remember that. But all the dementia stuff you have to remember. But the thing I want you to remember probably more than anything else is that Alzheimer's disease is not a normal part of aging. Okay. Alzheimer's disease is not something you get because you are getting old. I can probably think of 27 different ways to tell you that. I'm just going to say it again one more time. Alzheimer's disease is not a normal part of aging. You don't get it just because you're a certain age or you have a certain number of candles on your birthday cake. It is a disease process that some people get and others don't. And age is the single most important risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. Risk factor means this has got something to do with it. As we get older, our risk of having this disease does go up. The other most important risk factor is one I already mentioned, having a brain. If you've got a brain, you're susceptible to Alzheimer's disease. If you don't have a brain, you're probably not watching this Zoom conversation. So, and I don't mean to be crass, but having a brain is the thing everybody has in common when they have dementia. Age is one thing that a lot of people have in common, but not everyone, and we'll say more about that. Okay, Kathleen, I'm ready for the next point. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia, and Dell, here's where the answer to your question is coming. There are more than 70 different kinds of dementia that neurologists, researchers, other clinicians have identified over the last 120 years or so. Dementia is a big, broad category. Alzheimer's is a specific kind. On this cold winter day, what sounds good to me is a lot of things, but one thing that always sounds good to me, doesn't even have to be cold, is a nice, fresh, out of the oven, warm cookie, right? And a chocolate chip cookie is probably my go-to. In fact, if we were in person, I would probably say to you all, name me some kinds of cookies. And probably the first one would be chocolate chip. Some other kinds of cookies we could name would be peanut butter, Oreo, snickerdoodle, oatmeal raisin. I'm running out of fingers on this hand. We've got lots and lots of different kinds of cookies, at least 70, I'm sure, different kinds of cookies. We have 70 different kinds of dementia. Alzheimer's is the most common kind of dementia. When we say someone has Alzheimer's disease, we are most often saying they have dementia of the Alzheimer type or cookie of the chocolate chip type. Okay, everybody with me still? I can only see about 8 of you, so I won't name names, but I'm depending on the 8 of you I can see to tell me yep or what. Okay. Or you put in the chat if you're not with me. All cookies are amazing, right? You don't have to like every kind of cookie to know that cookies as an entity are wonderful, okay? All cookies, most cookies, the majority of cookies have sugar, flour, eggs, butter, something wonderful like chocolate chip or nuts. So all cookies have some things in common. Some cookies are round, some are square, some cookies have to be baked, some don't. Some cookies are gluten-free, some aren't. You get the picture? So cookies have some things that are in common, some things that are different. Dementia all dementias represent cognitive change, which Laurel mentioned at the start of our program here. It means the brain is doing something different than we expect it to, most likely because of a physiological or medical diagnosis. So all dementias have in common changes in memory, thinking, behavior. Some have changes in mobility, in vision and hearing. Most dementias are progressive, meaning you have them, you keep having them. They are not regressive. We can turn around and bring them, and get better. Some dementias are more common in some populations, in some age group, etc. So Dell, I hope you're still with me. You're not one of the 8 people I can see, so I don't know if you're thinking, why did I ask that? But anyway, the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia is that everybody who has Alzheimer's has dementia. Everybody. There is no such thing as having Alzheimer's without having dementia. But not everybody who has dementia has Alzheimer's. What are some other kinds of Alzheimer's? See, I've said it, I've messed up already. Some other kinds of dementia that you are likely familiar with: Parkinson's disease, frontotemporal dementia, which has been in the news more recently because of Bruce Willis. He has shared with the world that his diagnosis started with, if I remember correctly, started with having some trouble with language, which was important because as an actor, he had this responsibility of having to learn, memorize lines and then perform them. And if I remember the news reports correctly, that was something that wasn't going so well for him. And he and his family initially announced that he had something called aphasia, which is basically not being able to speak, not being able to produce or receive language. And then consequent clinical assessment led them to find out that he has frontotemporal dementia, which is literally dementia that is focused in the front and sides, the frontal and temporal lobes of your brain. I don't expect anybody to remember this, but my last name is actually Loeb. Spelled a little different than the lobes of the brain, but I feel like that this is my destiny to talk about brain lobes because that's my name. Anyway, so frontal temporal dementia, Parkinson's, vascular dementia, or very often dementia related to a stroke. Let's see, some other dementias you've probably heard of. Oh, Lewy body dementia, which is what Robin Williams, that's his name, right? You're experiencing a brain fart right now. Robin Williams had Lewy body dementia, which is very often presents as a mood and behavior disorder, very often looks like depression and anxiety, as well as changes in the brain's ability to function. So I could tell you a whole bunch of things about all 70 different kinds of dementia. I've told you a few things already. Know that when someone has Alzheimer's disease, 7 out of 10 times, or 70, again, that's a popular number here, 70% of dementia is probably dementia of the Alzheimer's type. So most often when we're saying someone has dementia, we are saying that they have Alzheimer's, but they are not interchangeable. Something I did not know 24 years ago, a lot of things. 24 years ago, I was only 24. So there's a lot of things I didn't know. We didn't know 24 years ago, and we know now that it is possible to have what we call mixed dementia. And what I mean by that, it is possible to have more than one kind of dementia. So a person can have both Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease and Lewy body and vascular and. Our brains are mysterious creatures, and they unfortunately can process so well throughout our lives, but they are also susceptible to one or more diagnoses of dementia. I didn't catch the name, but I saw the question. I did mean Robin Williams had Lewy body dementia. Michael J. Fox has Parkinson's disease. So thank you for checking me. I'm going to go back to that chat to make sure I read that correctly. Yes, Robin Williams has indeed passed. He did have Lewy body dementia. There is a really great documentary that I'll make sure you all have the link to at some point called Spark. And it is about Robin Williams and his journey with Lewy body dementia. And it has come to light that it's pretty likely that Robin Williams did not know that he had Lewy body dementia before he passed away. He knew something was wrong. I don't know him personally. I don't, I can't speak to really what he was thinking, although I watched the documentary a few times. He knew something was wrong, which I believe probably was a contributing factor to the way his life ended. But his diagnosis of Lewy body dementia was indeed posthumous. I'll say more about that as we go along. So thanks, Judy, for pointing that out. Michael J. Fox and Parkinson's. Michael J. Fox has told us that he's had Parkinson's. It's been probably longer than I think we expected for him to live. He's really been amazing. I hope that's because he has access to great care. But he's lived with Parkinson's for a long time, and Parkinson's is a kind of dementia, just like Alzheimer's disease. It looks different in some very clear ways. We hear the word Alzheimer's and we think about, oh gosh, I can't remember anything ever. We hear Parkinson's and we don't necessarily think about memory. We tend to think about gait and mobility and other things. So it's just incredible what we have learned about the brain. Don't move on yet, Kathleen, but I'm almost ready for you. I just want to draw everybody's attention to the image on the screen here. And this is an artist rendering. This is a drawing out of like an anatomy textbook. On the left, we see an image of what we think a healthy brain looks like. On the right, we see a brain that has advanced Alzheimer's disease. I want to point out to you, I'm sure it's fairly obvious, the main difference between the left side and the right side is size. So as our brains experience dementia of the Alzheimer's type, they shrink. It is true that all of our muscles experience atrophy as we get older. Our muscles, like our thigh muscles and our shoulder muscles and all of our, I don't want to say external muscles because that's not really what I mean, but we can see our muscles in our legs and our arms in a way that we don't see in our brain. As we get older, we tend to see older people having atrophy in their muscles, and it can be a very visible kind of change. That same atrophy is happening in the brain for all of us. All of us, as we get older, our brains are experiencing atrophy. When it is because of dementia like Alzheimer's disease, it is more advanced, it is more complex, it is more obvious, as you can see on this artist rendering. This picture is like a cross section of the brain. It's like if we were looking at somebody straight on, but we kind of did a line down the front of the brain. And you'll notice that the advanced brain is smaller. At one of my talks, one of my more recent talks, somebody said, that looks a lot like a cauliflower. And I thought, you're right, it does. And I have actually had I'm not sure it was a pleasure, it was certainly an honor. I have been able to hold a human brain in my hands. When I started working at KU, I got to go to the morgue as a part of my orientation to working at KU Medical Center. And the coroner did this lovely job of telling us how the morgue works. And then at the end of the tour, she said, would anybody like to hold some organs, specifically a brain? And I said, oh, yeah, I would. And so I got to see a brain, which fit about in my two hands together. That's all I can tell you about that brain. I don't know how old that brain was. I don't know if it was from a man or woman or whatever gender designation. I don't know what race they were. I don't know how they died, except I'm pretty sure it was not Alzheimer's because it didn't look like what we expect to see with Alzheimer's. And that was such a powerful moment for me that someone was generous enough to donate themselves. Their family was, I assume, supportive of that. And it's because of that action that we are able to have this conversation, because we are able to know how the brain works. And I don't want you to think I'm making fun at all, but I can confirm our brains do look like cauliflowers. They really do. They look like this picture. Okay, Kathleen, don't go yet. This would be more interesting probably if I were in person, but I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. You heard me say at least 3 times, Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging, right? You don't have to admit this, even though those of you that I can see on the screen, you don't have to nod or anything, but I'm wondering if anybody in this class has heard or used the term old timers disease. You don't have to. Oh, Laurel's admitting it. Okay. I won't call out anybody else, but probably you've at least heard it. You may have even used it. I've used it. Okay, fine. Alzheimer's disease. Why do people say that? Because age is a significant risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. Um, Getting old is not the light switch that has to flip for someone to get Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's disease is not a normal part of aging. However, I'm going to give you some statistics. And if there are any statisticians or people who understand numbers here, you may or may not get a kick out of this. Let's say we have a group of 100 people, age 65 or more. Kathleen, don't cheat because you probably can see the next one. 100 people, age 65 or more. How many, in terms of percent, how many of them do you think have Alzheimer's? Maybe drop a number in the chat just for fun. Or unmute yourself if you want, doesn't matter. Just curious to know. I have my suspicions about what you're going to say, but I don't want to leave you. Kelly, oh, my favorite name. Kelly says, I think 15. Oh, the numbers are coming in. Hang on, let me look. Okay, so I've got 15, 15, 20, 50, 40. Mary says 70. Mary says, I don't care what you say. It's most people. 60. Deb says 7, 5. Okay, we've got a great range of numbers here. I'm wanting, let's see, I'm looking through 15, 15, 20, 50, 40, 75, 60, and 7. The bad news is that all of you are wrong. Every last one of you is wrong. No one got the right answer. The better news is that I hate to call names, but you did put yourselves in the chat. So Annie and Mary, the better news for you is that you are definitely not right. It's not 60 or 70. And the reason that that's good news for you is that the number is much smaller. We think that among folks age 65 or more, about 10% have Alzheimer's disease. Question, Mary, Mary wants to redo. Mary, the question was, in a group of 100 people, or what percentage of people age 65 and older have Alzheimer's disease? And the answer is about 10%. So I think that might be surprising to some of you. The good news for all of us is that is probably a lower number than at least 10 of you put in the chat. And maybe the rest of you are thinking, oh, very good. Okay. So only about 10% of people age 65 and older have Alzheimer's disease, which, if we do some quick math, means 90% don't. So age is a risk factor for Alzheimer's, but age alone does not cause Alzheimer's disease. And why am I picking 65 and I am ageist? I try not to be ageist. But we know that because we know that age is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, we tend to focus on people 65 and older. We also know that Medicare is the age of eligibility. And so we got a lot of health information about people that are 65 and older because of Medicare. Somebody unmuted. Is there a question? Oh, no. Okay. In case you wanted to know how old you have to be officially old, I will tell you. But it's not my designation. It's part of the Older Americans Act, which is a piece of federal legislation. According to the Older Americans Act, to be officially old in the United States is 60, 60. I hope that's not bad news for anybody. Consider it good news because it means you're eligible for a lot of supportive services once you're 60. Okay. Suzanne, I see your comment in the chat. Suzanne says she's from the UK and the incidence in Europe is half of that, I believe. So what Suzanne is telling us is that we all need to move to Europe. Suzanne, your point is well taken. I'm not sure this is the point you wanted to make, but I'll make it. Probably most of the statistics I'm going to tell you today are not even probably, they are definitely United States based. And I'll say more about that, but I think that's important that you mentioned that. Okay. All right. One more question. How many people, let's say we have a group of people 85 and older instead of 65. How many of those do you think have Alzheimer's disease? Don't be scared to answer. I'm not going to make fun of anybody. Anybody, any one person want to guess how many people age 85 and older have Alzheimer's? Okay, I see 10%, I see 35%, 80%, 25%. Mary's back on 7. Heather says 20. Okay, nice range. I think you all are getting the point that as we get older, the incidence is indeed higher. But Kathleen, you can go ahead and reveal the next button on the screen. All right, so Alzheimer's disease is present in about 10% of people over 80 or 65 and about 50% of people over 85. Am I telling you that so that on the night before your 85th birthday, you can start making plans? No. First of all, don't wait till you're 85 to plan your later years. What I'm telling you that is our one piece of information that tells us age has something to do with this. Getting older increases our risk. So about half of people age 85 and older have Alzheimer's disease, but the other half don't. We just yesterday we memorialized former President Jimmy Carter, who lived to age 100, and everybody's making a big deal about the fact that he's the first, I believe, president to make it to age 100. And we've had presidents since, 17 something, right, with George Washington. So the first president to make it to age 100, the longest lived president, and certainly had health challenges at the end, spent some time on hospice, but as far as I know, did not have Alzheimer's disease. And he certainly was in that category of age 85 and older. He was probably in the group of highest risk for having this disease. So may he rest in peace. He's one example. Another example that's kind of fun is Betty White, Golden Girl Betty White, who made it to age 99.999, I think died within a month of her 100th birthday, and was still acting and being funny and appearing on Saturday Night Live at her advanced age. There's another example that age alone does not cause Alzheimer's disease. Okay, so I want to make sure you take that away with you. Okay, last button on this slide, Kathleen, please. I think I've probably said this, but yeah, when someone has Alzheimer's disease, we see changes in their memory, which is the one thing that I think all of us are kind of aware of. We also see changes in thinking and behavior. We're going to talk more about those in some of our subsequent sessions. Henry Kissinger made it to 100 also. Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, so yeah, we've got, I believe it's true that, people over 65 are the fastest growing age group in the United States. And by the year 2030, which is not that far away, it used to sound really far away, but it's almost here. By the year 2030, people over 65 will outnumber people under 18 in the United States. And that's an interesting statistic because people don't stay under the age of 18, but hopefully they do get past age 65, so that there are so many more children, or have been more children in the world than older adults, is going to, in social work and sociology, we kind of think of it as an upside down pyramid. Right now, we've got kids at the top being the largest age group, and that's going to shift, and we're going to have older adults being our largest age group, which is going to give us more information about what do I want to say about aging and how our brains work and what the connection is. Okay, there are probably more things I could say about this slide, but I want to move on. I don't think we'll have to come back, Kathleen. Thank you. So we can go ahead to the next section, next picture. What is normal aging? You can click the next one. Okay, stop there for just a moment. So the picture we saw before, which was the cross section of the brain, we were looking straight on at the brain. And at the bottom of the brain, you can see, I'm pointing like you can see where I'm pointing, but at the bottom of the brain where the image is darker, that's the hippocampus. That's the part of our brain that is pretty heavily involved in what we call episodic memory, also known as short-term memory. So things you've learned in the last few minutes, hours, days, as opposed to things you've learned years upon years upon years ago. Okay, Kathleen, you can hit the next button. Okay, so on your screen, you've got two red boxes. That's where the hippocampus is. And I hope you can see this image well enough. On your screen, you might have to move the box around a little bit that is showing the slides. If you move it to the right a little bit, it will enlarge. Or just take my word for it. You can see in the slide that's marked MTA0 at the top left. Take a look at that slide. and then look at the slide at the bottom right that's marked MTA4. What you're seeing there is changes in the hippocampus, the part of the brain that looks at short-term memory or episodic memory. And you can see on slide number, the one that's marked number 4, you can see there's a bigger space. This is atrophy. This is loss of brain material. These images are from an MRI, magnetic resonant imaging. An MRI tells us information about the structure, the shape, and the size of whatever part we're MRIing. It's not a verb. Whatever part we're looking at. Just like an X-ray shows us the shape, the structure, the size of our bones or whatever. There is nothing on any of these slides that you're looking at here that says, there is the Alzheimer's. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at a set of slides that shows how a brain has changed from what it looks like in the slide at the top left marked 0 to what it looks like the slide on the bottom right that marked 4, and you should be able to see that that space has gotten bigger. The age of the person on this slide is mid-70s, I believe. I do not know, before you ask, I do not know for sure that the first slide and the last slide are the same person. I'm not sure. What I do know is the first 2 slides, 0 and 1, are representative of a normal brain, a healthy brain that does not have any Alzheimer's disease. And then slides 3 and 4 in particular are absolutely a brain that has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Okay, Kathleen, you can put the next thing up. I think it just said, oh, no, yeah, I mean, yes, but keep going. Okay, mild atrophy. So the slides in 0 and 1 represent a brain that might be about 75 years old. And that's what we expect to see. We see some atrophy because the brain that's lived and worked for 75 years is going to have some atrophy. Number 4 is maybe 10 years later, somebody that's 85 and that absolutely has some progressing, ongoing Alzheimer's disease. Okay. Any questions about that? Anything that's not clear about that? I will say MRI is a pretty standard tool that we use. We can't say, aha, here's the Alzheimer's just from an MRI alone. But if we look at someone's brain today, January 10th, and it looks like the one that's marked 0, and in 6 months or a year from now, we look at that same person and it looks more like number 2 or number 3, we can say, oh, something's going on. And then another year or 2 later, we can look at the last slide and say, yep, something is definitely happening. I want to make sure you all hear me say Alzheimer's is progressive and fatal. It is typically a pretty slow moving disease. No one goes to bed one night and wakes up the next day having Alzheimer's disease. You go to bed tonight and you have Alzheimer's disease tomorrow, you had it yesterday too. You had it 6 months ago, you had it a year ago. There is no such thing as sudden onset Alzheimer's. Your brain doesn't just change in the blink of an eye. I am a longtime fan, it doesn't come on anymore, but a longtime fan of the soap opera All My Children. Maybe some of you were too. And I watched that show from when I was a little girl with my mom during the summer, all the way up until I was like in college and I could watch it on myself. And the thing that always happened on that show, somebody was always falling and hitting their head and then waking up and they didn't have any memory anymore. And they didn't know who their husband was. And it was all very dramatic. And it was TV, you have to remember. If that happens, if someone hits their head and wakes up and does not remember anything, they probably don't have Alzheimer's. They have amnesia or they have soap opera syndrome. The point is, this is not something that comes on all of a sudden. There also is nothing that you can do in particular that says, if I do this, I will get Alzheimer's. If I don't do this, I'll never get it. Okay. It's not a binary. It's not one thing or another. We have so many factors to consider there. Alzheimer's disease from time of diagnosis to end of life is an average of about 8 to 10 years. Average. Okay. If you think about somebody being diagnosed at 65 and living another 8 to 10 years, life expectancy in the United States for a man is about 72, 73 years. For a woman, it's closer to 78 or 80. Those are for white men and white women. Life expectancy looks different in other populations. And of course, we have to think about socioeconomic factors as well. But on average, Alzheimer's disease lasts about 8 to 10 years. Consider that somebody who is 85 and diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease may not have lived 10 more years anyway. But, and here's some real wisdom, this one you can write down. The longer you live, the longer you live. If you make it to 85, your life expectancy is already above average. And barring something like Alzheimer's disease or another major diagnosis, your likelihood of living even more goes up. So when someone has Alzheimer's disease at 85, they were already probably more disposed to live past 85 because they made it to 85. The Alzheimer's disease will be a factor. The younger a person is when they have Alzheimer's disease, and when I say younger, I mean under 65, the more quickly it moves. So younger onset Alzheimer's disease is a thing. People younger than 65 can get Alzheimer's disease. When they do, it moves much more quickly than that 8 to 10 year average. Okay, Kathleen, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, don't do anything yet, Kathleen. This slide is always really tricky. I can't see all of you, so but I bet once I tell Kathleen to go ahead and put the next one up, despite me saying you don't need to write this down, you will get it. You're all gonna take screenshots and you're gonna look at this list and you're gonna say, oh no, 3 of these things have happened to me today. What terrible news is this? Don't do that, okay? What I'm about to tell you are some warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. These are things you should pay attention to for yourself, for someone you love, someone in your community. If you notice one or more of these things, it is appropriate to talk to a healthcare provider. Please do not use this as a checklist for everything that is wrong with you and say, Kelly G. Loeb diagnosed me with Alzheimer's. First of all, I can't diagnose you. I'm a social worker. I am not a neurologist or a physician. I can't diagnose anybody on Zoom. That's terrible. But I can equip you. I can give you information about what to look for. Okay, Kathleen, you can go ahead and press until all 10 are up on the board. Kathleen is my hero for today. Thank you. This is so much easier being able to have you do this. Okay, so as those are coming up, you're going to see things like memory loss, which I think we all know is associated with Alzheimer's disease. Has anybody, darn it that I can't see you. I'm going to stop harping on that, but I bet all of you have forgotten something today. It's 2:14, which means the day is a little more than half over. It's still daytime. Darn that standard time. The sun's going to go down in about an hour and a half. But we're still pretty early in the day. You probably have forgotten something. You will probably forget something else today. If you have not forgotten anything yet, don't worry. You still have time to forget something. I am telling you that because forgetfulness on its own is a part of being human. We all forget something. We all probably forget at least one thing a day, maybe more. Simple forgetting is not any kind of warning sign of anything other than you have a brain, you got a lot going on, your brain is working exactly as we expect it to. I assume everybody on this Zoom call is at least 5 years old. And bless your heart if you are not 5 years old and someone is making me watch this. But everybody is at least 5 years old, which means we all have a very recent memory of what happened 5 years ago in 2020, COVID. We all know what that was like. It changed all of our lives in some very substantial ways, even if we didn't get COVID. It changed the way we move in the world. It was traumatizing. It was a lot. I can't wait to 24 years from now read some of the studies that are going to be done on COVID that examine how COVID just kind of impacted our daily lives as humans. Are we better because of COVID? Will we be better? Did we learn some things? I hope we learned some things. Was it absolutely abominable and terrible? And did it take some things away from us? Yes. Why am I harping on that? Because our brains are elastic, because our brains can adapt, because our brains take in a lot of information, our brains let go of a lot of information. Memory loss on its own should not be any sort of warning sign. However, it is the first thing on this list. Memory loss that disrupts daily life. So what is an example of memory loss that disrupts daily life? One that's very common, one that happens to me probably more days than not, is where are my beep, beep, car keys. I even have a place in my house where I put them so I don't have to have this fight with myself every day. I'm not sure I currently know where they are, except for I know they're in my house because I haven't left today. Where in my house they are, don't know. And I have one of those cars that will just start if the key is close enough, which is terrible. Whose idea was that? Because then I don't have to remember to have my keys sometimes. One time I put my keys on top of my car, drove out of my house, drove down the street and got on 71 highway and got almost downtown when I heard my keys slid from the top of my car down the back window. And thankfully I wasn't speeding because I would never do that. And thankfully that lip between the trunk and the window of the car caught the keys. And I was able to, once I realized what in the world was happening, pull over and get out and retrieve my keys. Did that memory loss disrupt my daily life? Yes. Yes, it did. I was so both relieved and angry and oh my god, how could that happen, and darn this car that the key doesn't have to actually be inside the car for it to start. But here's the thing, I was able to have a pretty rational and reasonable reaction to that. I pulled over, I got out of the car, I retrieved the keys, I put them inside. I took a lot of deep breaths after kind of freaking out, and I went on with my day. As far as I know, I don't have Alzheimer's disease. And also, Alzheimer's is not contagious because I'd be in a lot of trouble if it was, because I've been around a lot of folks with this disease for a long time. So did that disrupt my daily life? Yes. The kind of disruption that we might be more concerned about in terms of brain health and talking to a physician is not only did I lose my keys, but I don't really know or care that I lost them. And when somebody hands them to me, I don't know what they're for. That's a different kind of forgetfulness than where are my keys. There's a whole industry. Some of you might even have that tile thing that you can put on your keys, and then when you can't find them, you go to your smart device and you say, Alexa, find my keys. And she says, oh, they're in the living room or whatever. There's a whole industry predicated on this idea that humans cannot keep up with their car keys, and we can sell something to them to help with that. So that kind of forgetfulness is not. Oh, my Alexa is actually, she just said, Kelly, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. Okay, so anyway, memory loss that is disruptive to daily life in a way that it is dangerous, it is repetitive, somebody else has to point it out. That's the kind of memory loss we want to pay attention to. The same is true for the next couple of ones. Challenges in planning or solving problems, that's so broad as to be kind of useless. I apologize. But if we have challenges in kind of navigating our daily life, who doesn't have that kind of challenge? I mean, Laurel and I talked a couple times this morning, right, about what are we going to do about this snow? And we were rational about it. We didn't freak out, and here we are on Zoom. Someone who has a dementia diagnosis might not have been able to follow through on a plan to figure that out. Difficulty completing familiar tasks at home. We just got ourselves out of a holiday season where many of us probably invited a bunch of folks over and made a big meal. And one way that we knew that one of my grandmothers had Alzheimer's disease is that she had been the Thanksgiving cook for years upon years. And one year the Thanksgiving dinner was not good. And she had been a home economics major. And she had been the best cook anybody knew. And so for the Thanksgiving dinner to not be good was like, what's going on? That alone wasn't necessarily the warning sign, but she also had numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. She had something in all of those categories. She was 85. And so all of those things put together let us know. So you could look at the remaining 6 or 7 signs on here. You could say some of these sound familiar to me, and that's okay. You could also say some of these sounds familiar to me about myself or someone else, and I understand the difference, the nuance between this is just part of being human, and this is happening, and this person is not recognizing it, or this is happening and it's getting worse, or it's happening and it's not stopping, and then you want to pay attention to how that is going. I will point out numbers 9 and 10, withdrawal from work or social activities and changes in mood and personality, can also look a heck of a lot like depression and anxiety in a person of any age. So you want to watch out for that. The buzzwords that you want to really focus on this slide are difficulty, familiar, new. So things that are a change. If you've got someone that's never been able to cook very well, then we're not too worried when Thanksgiving dinner is not great. If you've got someone who has always been very good at that and then they're not, pay attention to that. If you've got someone that's always kind of been late to appointments and is never great about calendars and promptness, I wish I could tell you if they start all of a sudden being on time to things, that's something to pay attention to. That's probably not Alzheimer's. I don't know. I don't know what that is, but it's probably not dementia. So these are some things you'll want to pay attention to. And again, you'll get these slides, so don't feel like you're welcome to take a screenshot if you know how, but you'll get the slides and you'll be able to have those later. Oh, I just tried to move the slide and it didn't work. Kathleen, you go to the next screen, please. Okay, who gets Alzheimer's disease? All right, so here's your tax. You have to listen to me, but you get to meet Naomi and Grace. That's Naomi and Grace on the screen. Those are my two grandmothers. Both of them had Alzheimer's disease. They were both from small towns in Louisiana. Naomi on the left is my paternal grandmother, born in 1928. Grace on the right is my maternal grandmother, born in Louisiana in 1922. Both diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease after they reached 85. It's like they were right out of the textbook. Listen, I thought I was going to have a get out of Alzheimer's free card because I worked at the Alzheimer's Association. By that time, I had worked there for several years. And I thought, okay, listen, I'm doing this community service. Nobody in my family is going to get Alzheimer's. And then not just one, but two. So who knows? You can't get out of it. Both of them were educated with advanced degrees, with master's degrees. Why am I telling you that? Because lots of people think, oh, well, if this is a brain disease, then education might be protective. It might be, might not be. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But both of these ladies had master's degrees. My grandmother on the left was a school teacher. My grandmother on the right was a school teacher and then a principal, and had a degree in home economics. So what I'm telling you is that these ladies were using their brains at probably the highest levels, still got Alzheimer's disease. Okay. A couple other factors they had that I'll tell you. So go ahead, Kathleen, and you can bring up the next. I think there's 4. Thank you. You got what I meant. Top of the list. Somebody in the United States develops Alzheimer's disease every 66 seconds. So about once a minute. I do not want you all to think that people are just walking down the street and every 66 seconds they're falling over with Alzheimer's. That's not what we mean, because Alzheimer's doesn't work like that. But enough people are getting diagnosed with this disease that if we took a count and we made it on a timeline, we would see about every minute. So about 60 people in an hour, or not quite 60 people every hour, times 24 hours, times whatever. By the year 2050, that's going to double. The time is going to cut in half. It'll be every 33 seconds instead of every 66. That's mostly because people are living longer, and age is the biggest risk factor. It's also because we have better technology. Think about Dr. Alzheimer in 1906. He did not have an MRI. He did not have a PET scan. I don't know what he had. I always say I'm going to look this up and then I don't remember. So here's an example of forgetfulness. I don't remember when x-rays were a thing. I think x-rays were available, but you can't really x-ray a brain to find Alzheimer's. That's not a tool. So anyways, in 1906, Dr. Alzheimer had a 58-year-old patient who was exhibiting those 10 warning signs that I showed you before. And he said, oh no, he probably spoke German or French, not English. But anyway, we'll just pretend he spoke English. He said, oh no, this is not normal. A woman of age 58 should not be experiencing this. Keep in mind that in 1906, to be 58 was probably equivalent to being 85 today. 58 was much older than it is now. And he said, no, this 58-year-old woman should not be having these symptoms. Something is going on. And now we know that it was Alzheimer's disease. So those numbers are increasing for lots of reasons: better technology, better medicine, better diagnostic tools. In the United States, we have 6.2 million Americans with the disease. That's up from just under 5 million 24 years ago. Darn it, I meant to ask you this. Well, you get a bonus. About 3.8 million of them are women. So almost 4 out of 6 more women get Alzheimer's disease than men. I haven't seen everybody on the Zoom here. I do think that there are more women on this call, which is one explanation. for why more women. I see, Shelley, your question, do more women of the same age have Alzheimer's than men of that age? That's a great question. The short answer, Shelley, is yes. Um, Age is a very important risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. More women of the same age, I'm assuming you mean if we took a group of 85-year-olds, would more of them be women than men? Yes. Why is that? Several reasons. Women tend to live longer than men. If age is the risk factor and more women are likely to get to age 85, then it follows that we see more women with Alzheimer's. We also know that there are more women in the United States, more women around the world, in fact. So sheer numbers, more women are going to get Alzheimer's than men. Women tend to go to the doctor more often, so they get diagnosed more often. Men tend to be, how shall I say this diplomatically, more stubborn. That's completely anecdotal. I have no research for that, but they tend to be less likely to go to a doctor. And so there's more of a baseline about, oh, I'm feeling this way today. A year from now, I'm feeling this way, and we can compare, and that helps in a diagnosis. Um, any men within range of this call, do not think you are off the hook. We do think that 2 out of 3 people with Alzheimer's are female. However, men are still at great risk of having this disease. These numbers are going to change at some point in the next generation because the way we look at gender and sex is changing. So when I say more women have Alzheimer's disease than men, I am saying that through the lens of we tend to assign one sex or one gender at birth. I don't know what that's going to look like as that evolves over time. That'll be, some researcher probably can do a big study on that. But anyway, that's going to change. But as of right now, more women than men. Dell, I saw your question about diet. Here's where I will invoke my right to say, hang on, it's coming. Okay. Third bullet, people of every race and ethnicity have Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's is what we call an equal opportunity disease. Everybody of every race, socioeconomic position, religious status, whatever. Everybody is at risk of having Alzheimer's disease. However, our research tells us that Black people, and particularly Black women, me and my grandmothers, are twice as likely to have Alzheimer's disease. Why is that? First of all, my immunity card apparently did not work. I've been working in this field for so long, and both grandmothers got this diagnosis. We also think that it's not necessarily something about being Black, but socioeconomic factors like access to healthcare, like systemic racism, like comorbidity of high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease. All of those you'll see in a minute are also risk factor for Alzheimer's. I do want to go back a little. You don't have to change anything on the screen, but I told you about how educated and all that my grandmothers were. Neither of them had any of those other diagnoses. Neither of them had high blood pressure or diabetes, heart disease, cholesterol, nothing. In fact, the only time either one of them had ever been hospitalized was to have their children. My one grandmother had 5 children, my other grandmother had 3. So they were in the hospital in the 1940s having babies. Other than that, nothing. So that really kind of disproves my theory that maybe some other diagnoses are at play here. I don't know what it is for them. Is their race a factor? Probably, although they both had, my father is a physician, my mother is a nurse, and I'm a social worker. So they had access to whatever it is they needed. I don't know why they got Alzheimer's disease. They just did. And that's the case for a lot of people. We can also say the same for Hispanic people, or slightly less. For Hispanic people, we think it's about 1.5 times more likely. To anybody on this call who is neither Black nor Hispanic, this does not mean you're free and clear. Because looking at my grandmothers, I would have said, nope, they're not in the category, and they both got this disease. So we don't know, but we do pay attention to patterns and trends. People younger than 65 can get Alzheimer's disease. That is, of course, not as common. You don't hear it called young-timers disease, but it is possible for people to be younger than 65 to have the disease. The youngest person on record that I'm aware of to have had Alzheimer's disease was 26. And that person had a sibling who was 29, and both of them had the diagnosis. I mentioned, I think before, when you're younger and you have Alzheimer's disease, significantly younger than 65, it tends to move more quickly. When someone is younger than 65 and has Alzheimer's disease, it is more likely that there is a genetic component. So these two people were siblings, so they shared some DNA. I know somebody is like, oh, please get to the part where you talk about, does Alzheimer's run in families? Hang on, it's coming. Joan asked, is early onset Alzheimer's increasing? Joan, I'm going to say yes with an asterisk behind it. I think our awareness of it is increasing. I think we know more. Is it increasing because of something related to age or environment? I don't know. But our recognition of it, yes, is growing. And thank you, Kathleen. This is just, for a wow factor. More than 11 million people in the US provide unpaid care. So there are lots and lots of caregivers in this country who are caring for someone with this disease. They give a lot of money and a lot of time. Those hours valued at $257 million, I'm sure is too small a number. But the impact of this disease is significant. Okay, let's go to the next slide so I can get Dell's question answered and everybody else's questions answered that you have been very patient with me for. Here's a pie chart. Speaking of pie, lots of different kinds of pies. Remember, there's lots of different kinds of Alzheimer's. Okay, so here's a pie chart about risk factors. You'll see the biggest piece of this pie is age, and I've said it many times. Age is the single most important risk factor. What that means is the older we get, the greater our risk is of having the disease. But remember, getting older is not automatic diagnosis of Alzheimer's. The little symbol under age is the symbol for female. More women have Alzheimer's disease for all those reasons I explained. The next piece of this delicious, horrible pie is family history. Somebody out there, I can't believe you didn't ask this before. You must trust me. Somebody out there is saying, well, both my grandmothers and my uncle and my cousin and my neighbor all had Alzheimer's disease. What does that mean? Well, you can see on this pie chart that family history is a pretty significant chunk of the pie. Family history matters. But if you read ahead, you also see at the bottom there, it says, the vast majority of cases are not hereditary. How can both of those things be true? I don't know, but they are. You're just going to have to trust me. We know family history matters. I'm sitting here. This would be more impactful if you all could see me in person, but you see my hair is every color. Pick a color, it's in my hair. I will reveal to you that this is not my actual hair. I bought this hair and had it braided into my own hair, which is brown and a little bit gray. My parents both have brown and a little bit of gray hair, so I got that from them. My parents also have brown eyes. I got that from them. So we share some DNA. In fact, over Christmas, we got one of those Ancestry DNA kits, and I just mailed it. So we're going to find out. I don't know what they're going to tell us, but I'm super excited to find out what's in our DNA. And if it's anything interesting, like you have a gene for Alzheimer's, I'll probably add it to this presentation. So stay tuned. So family history matters. The things that our ancestors have get passed down from generation to generation, like hair color and eye color, and maybe dementia. Something we didn't know 24 years ago that we know a whole lot more about now is that there is some genetic component to having Alzheimer's disease and the other dementias. There is a gene that is implicated, connected to Alzheimer's disease. The gene is called the APOE4 gene. That probably stands for something that I actually don't know. I've never only heard of people call it the APOE4 gene. Having that gene might increase one person's risk of having Alzheimer's disease. Having more than one copy of that gene likely increases the risk of having Alzheimer's disease. Okay. You can have one or more copies of that gene that is implicated in Alzheimer's disease and not have Alzheimer's disease. Conversely, you can have no copies of that gene and still have Alzheimer's disease. That's how both of these things can be true. Family history matters. Most Alzheimer's disease is not hereditary. Both of my grandmothers had Alzheimer's disease. Both my parents reached age 75 last year. My parents are living their best life. They are way more fabulous than I am. They just told me that they've recently found out that when you go skiing at their favorite place to ski in Bryan Head, Utah, once you get to be 75, you can ski for free. You don't have to buy a lift ticket. So guess what they want to go do? They want to go skiing. I think that is a terrible idea, even for the two coolest people I know, because the fall risk of skiing is super high. Plus, I hate snow in winter, and they have the nerve enough to ask me, do I want to go with them? No, I am not paying to go to snow. I have snow for free at my house, and I don't like skiing. I used to go skiing when I was little because they made me, and I thought it was boring. If I went, I would stay in the lodge and drink my hot chocolate and wave at you. Anyway, that was just a little tangent. Why am I even telling you that? Oh, because both of my grandparent mothers had Alzheimer's disease. My parents at 75 are thinking about going skiing and doing all kinds of fun things. They don't so far appear to have any indicators of Alzheimer's. They got 10 more years until they're 85. That could change. I hope it doesn't. It might not. There is not a thing I can do about that. Even if any of us, my grandmothers, my parents, me, even if any of us have any combination of the genes that might be indicated for Alzheimer's disease. Let's say we do. Let's say Ancestry sends me a letter and says, oh, Kelly, you have the Alzheimer's gene. I hope they don't do that. But if they do that, then what? I can't take it out. I can't get a brain transplant. I can't not have the gene. So there's so many factors we have to consider. And again, I said you can have the gene and not have Alzheimer's disease. So all of that is to say family history matters. Having a relative, especially a first degree relative like a parent or a sibling that has Alzheimer's disease, probably increases your risk of having it. That's genetics 101. That's true for any kind of diagnosis. Not having a family member probably makes you a little bit less likely to have the disease. Somebody's got to be in the first in the family. In our family's case, both my grandmothers were the first ones we knew. They were the first ones that lived long enough. My great grandparents' generation lived to be, my great grandmother lived to be 62, which is not bad, but she had been born in 1898. My great grandfather only lived to be 40 something, and he had been born in 1892, let's say. So people in our family hadn't lived long enough to be more at risk for Alzheimer's disease. So we don't know. So all of that is to say family history matters. There's not a whole lot you can do about family history. Can you find out if you have the gene? Yes. Do you want to find out if you have the gene? I'm not answering that for anybody. I don't know. We need more research about what that looks like. So age, gender, family history are the things you cannot change. Gender being a little more fluid now. The rest of the pie chart are things you have some measure of control over. Smoking, if you don't start. If you do, stop. Very easy for me to say, I know, but smoking is a risk factor, not only for Alzheimer's, but for everything else on here. It makes it harder. So if you're a smoker, consider stopping. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes in particular, is probably linked to higher incidence of Alzheimer's disease. There's some research that suggests that that Alzheimer's might be diabetes type 3. We kind of go back and forth on that. That's a little clickbaity. That's kind of an attention getting thing that people say. We don't have enough evidence to say that one way or another. We do know that our brains use glucose to function for energy. And if the body does not process glucose well, like it does in both types of diabetes, then the brain is going to have some consequences from that. Do we see more Alzheimer's in people with diabetes? In some cases. Are there plenty of people who have Alzheimer's who don't have diabetes? Yeah. So it's good practice to avoid whatever it is that might increase your risk of getting diabetes, so you don't get diabetes and so you don't get Alzheimer's disease. High blood pressure is connected to stroke, which is connected to vascular dementia. So whatever you can do to keep your blood pressure at good levels is a good idea. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death in the United States. Alzheimer's is #6. More people die of Alzheimer's disease or with Alzheimer's disease than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. This is not a contest. We don't want to be #1. We don't, we want to eliminate all of these. But the point is that all of these things play a role. Whatever you're doing to take care of your heart and your head is a good idea in terms of reducing your risk. You have, like I said, you have some level of control over not getting heart disease, et cetera, on the left side of the pie. You cannot change your family history. You can lie about your age, but you're going to be 65 or 85 at some point. And then the gender piece is, ongoing. So those are some things to keep in mind. Okay, Kathleen, we can go to the next page. Okay, how do we diagnose Alzheimer's? Dr. Alzheimer in 1906 could only use autopsy to diagnose his patient. He did not have the sophisticated technology that we have today. 24 years ago, I would have said the only way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease with 100% accuracy is through autopsy, so posthumously, when we can go in and look at that brain like we saw the drawing of. We can go in the brain and we can see the atrophy. We can see Alzheimer's is characterized by plaques and tangles. So your brain cells get tangled, which means they can't process information. And somewhat like you get plaque on your teeth, you get plaque in your brain and you can't brush it away. So the plaques and the tangles compromise the brain's ability to process information. Our brains are our control centers of the body. So if your brain can't tell your heart to beat and your lungs to breathe, this is a problem. So much more than memory, people. Forgetfulness is the least of it. Okay. So clinicians use a combination of different methods to diagnose Alzheimer's. Imaging is really important. The MRI, like I showed you, CAT scan is another way to look at structure of the brain. PET scan is the newest technology. PET scans are colorful. So MRIs and CTs are black and white. PET scans look, you see, I do this hair for you. PET scans look like rainbows, like my hair. A PET scan will show up in colors red, yellow, green, blue. And instead of focusing on the shape and the size of the brain, they're focusing on brain activity. So take a PET scan and all the colors there, and an MRI or a CT scan, and you see the brain, oh, the brain has gotten smaller. Those two things together can give us some indication that, yes, this is Alzheimer's. Mr. Wallace, I see your question. Hang on, I'll get to it in just a second. Family history, health, conversations with the person who is diagnosed. What's changed for you over the last 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 years, whatever. I've noticed grandma doesn't cook Thanksgiving dinner as well anymore. I've noticed that she has trouble driving the car. All of those things that somebody else notices, keep a journal, keep a list, keep notes. That plus the MRI plus the CT scan is helpful. Lab work, checking thyroid levels, checking blood sugar, checking for urinary tract infections, very much look like Alzheimer's disease. They make people forgetful and cranky, and they need penicillin and they need to drink some cranberry juice. And then their memory problems might resolve. There are several exams that you can do, which are like snapshots in time. So I could ask you, what is today's date? And listen, it's a new year, a new month, and New Year's Day came in on a Wednesday, and I and a lot of other people thought it was Monday for a long time. And I still have to think real hard about whether today is Friday, or I know it's not Saturday because I'm working, but other than that, I rely on my phone and my calendar to tell me what day it is. I don't know how the kids, the millennials and the Gen Zs of today who grew up with everything digital, I don't know how they're going to know how to tell time or anything when they didn't learn how to use an analog clock. Anyway, that's my Generation X rant. Anyway, the mini mental state exam asks questions like, what is today's date? Where are we? Starting from the number 100, count backwards by sevens. When I tell people that in person, I can usually see people's face saying, oh no. 100 minus 7 is 93. If you said 92 or 94, are you right? No. Do you have Alzheimer's? Probably not. Maybe you're not good at math. Maybe you didn't use your fingers. If you are like my grandmother and the doctor says spell or count backwards from 100 by 7, you will look over the top of your glasses and say, you're the doctor, why don't you know? Because she, as a school teacher and as a person who was very proud of herself, much like her granddaughter, was not about to tell the doctor she didn't know how to do 100 minus 7. Oh no. So was that the right answer for her? Yes. Was it an indicator that something is different? Also, yes. So there are lots of screening tools we can use. And all of those things, the results of them all added together, let us know something is going on. Is it Alzheimer's? Maybe. Is it also a urinary tract infection? Is it depression, anxiety? Is it a whole list of things? Alzheimer's disease is really a process of elimination. It's usually the last thing we want. I mean, we don't ever want it to be Alzheimer's, but it might be the last thing in a whole list of things we're looking for. Autopsy is still the gold standard, but we can get to a diagnosis while someone is alive that's more than 90% correct. We can be pretty sure. Okay, next slide I think is going to answer Dell's question. I honestly don't remember what the next slide. Oh no, treatment. Okay, real quick because I know we're getting real close on our time. This one can be kind of short. Currently, no cure for Alzheimer's. We don't have anything that says if you do this or don't do this, you will or won't get Alzheimer's. At the ADRC, which is the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, we believe the cure is going to come because people participate in clinical trials. Aspirin is available because of a clinical trial. Penicillin is available because somebody did research. So we need people to do research. The current medications for Alzheimer's disease are not like a Tylenol for a headache. If you have a headache, you take Tylenol, then in an hour, you don't have a headache. If you have Alzheimer's disease and you take Aricept, in an hour, you still have Alzheimer's disease. In fact, you're always going to have Alzheimer's disease. It does not go away. What we think the medications do is slow down what is already a slow process. I mentioned 8 to 10 years from time of diagnosis to end of life. Taking one or more of the Alzheimer's medications might make that closer to 10 years than to 8 years. And it's going to make the early years, the first stages of the disease, longer. It's going to make that part last longer so people can have conversations about making decisions about long-term care and about end of life and about, so I have this diagnosis, I want to maximize my quality of life to enjoy this while I am more capable here at the front end than on the later end. There are 2 different categories of medicines for Alzheimer's disease. One is the earlier ones that have been around for 25 years or more. We think those help with mood and behavior. They help people be less likely to be irritated or agitated, still have Alzheimer's disease. So they work on symptoms and behaviors. New medications approved by the FDA within the last year or 2 are working on the biology of the brain. So the PET scan or the PET scans and the CAT scans and the MRIs can show changes in the structure of the brain. We think the infusions that we have for Alzheimer's medications today specifically work on the biology of the brain to reduce those biomarkers, to reduce whatever it is in our brains and our nerve cells that is causing the disease process. We've got 2 of those new drugs currently available. You have to get them from a clinician. You don't administer them yourself. You have to go to an Alzheimer's disease research center. They are dosed depending on which one you get, either every month or twice a month, I believe it is. They are showing some promising results. They are not eliminating the disease. They are not preventing the disease. Please do not ask for a shot of Leqembi so that you won't get Alzheimer's. That won't work. Plus, you can't afford it. I mean, I don't know everybody's life on this call, but these infusions are costing like $50,000 a year. It's outrageous. Medicare pays 80%. You pay 20%. 20% of $50,000 is still $10,000. One way to get around that is by clinical trial participation. The nice news about Medicare is that drug costs are coming down. However, the part of Medicare that pays for Alzheimer's infusions is not the part of Medicare that's giving you a break on drug costs. So we're in a process. We're still learning, still working on it. But medications are available. We don't yet have the thing that will cure the disease or prevent it, but it's coming. I saw, I think, question from Mr. Wallace about do you die with or of Alzheimer's disease? The answer is both. Depends. Cause of death, when someone who has Alzheimer's dies, it could be that they're 89 and they were going to die anyway, because 89 is a pretty good long life. It could be that they had a heart attack heart disease is the single most number one cause of death. When you have Alzheimer's disease, your brain can't tell the rest of your body what to do. So you might die of an infection. You might fall and break a hip. Would either of those things have happened without the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease? Maybe, but maybe not. When my grandmother died, both of one grandmother, I'm not sure, my maternal grandmother, cause of death on her death certificate was number one, heart failure, number two, Alzheimer's disease. So it can be coexisting. Pneumonia is very common in this population, and a person who has Alzheimer's disease is probably not going to have the strength to fight off pneumonia as well as someone without Alzheimer's disease. So it's multifactorial. Shelley, has it been determined whether the tau tangles, Shelley's been reading some articles, is that a cause or a symptom? We don't know yet. We know posthumously, so in autopsy, we know that tau tangles are present. Are they present because of the disease? Or did they cause the disease? It's still up in the air. I'm sorry, I hope that's not too frustrating an answer for you, Shelley. We know that the tau tangles are implicated. We don't yet know to what extent. Okay, let's go to the next slide, because I think this is what Dell has been waiting for about food. Maybe you've all been waiting for the one about food. Yes. So what do we know about cure and prevention? So we don't have the thing that says, aha, do this and you won't get Alzheimer's, or don't do this. That being said, we have some pretty good ideas for what might be helpful. I said before, what's good for the heart is good for the head. So whatever you're doing to reduce your risk of heart disease and stroke and high cholesterol is also good for your brain. In terms of diet, it's not really all that shocking, but eating a diet that is rich in green leafy vegetables and fruits, particularly things like kale. The marketing people for kale, man, they have got it right. But kale, spinach, even broccoli are thought to be good for your brain, as well as blueberries. The thing that makes blueberries blue is a component that's good for brain health. So anything that's naturally blue, like blueberries, I can't think of a lot of things that are naturally blue, but also raspberries, grapes, those are all good for your brain. Salmon with omega-3 fatty acids and other fish like cod are both really good for you. Some of you may have heard about the Mediterranean diet. And that's a diet that people who live in that part of the world, not people that go on vacation to the Mediterranean. Like if you go on a Mediterranean cruise and eat all the cruise food, have fun, but not that. But if you eat what the people who live there eat, because they go fishing and they pick fruits and vegetables, that's thought to be very healthy for you. KU has a couple of studies ongoing that are looking at particular diets. We have one with avocados, which is a lot of fun. The hypothesis is that eating avocados is good for your brain. We have a study right now that's asking people who don't typically eat avocados to eat one avocado every day for 12 weeks. That's 84 avocados. Why is that the number? I don't know. But we have a study right now looking at the avocado group is going to be better off than the non-avocado group. When we find out, we'll tell you. So that one's fun. You see the red wine on the screen, and thanks for the warning, Kathleen. The red wine on the screen, we think red wine has some properties in it that are good for your brain. Do not overdo it, because there is a kind of dementia called Korsakoff syndrome that is related to overuse of alcohol. So don't get drunk, but a glass of red wine with your dinner, okay. And dark chocolate also is thought to be helpful. Moderation in all things, including moderation. Okay, so those are a few things about diet. We do think exercise is also contributing. Aerobic exercise that gets your heart rate up, as well as strength training like weightlifting or what's that one, Pilates, anything that makes you work out your muscles, either because you're breathing hard or because you're stretching and resisting. We've got some studies at KU about those. And I don't know if most of you live in Lawrence. We have studies that you can come to KU and participate in. We also have studies that you can do at home or over the phone or on Zoom. So lots of opportunities. We also have a hot tub study, which is both my favorite and not my favorite, because they told me I'm too young to participate in it. but we do have a hot tub study for people age 65. We're asking people to come get in the hot tub 3 times a week. And apparently the theory is that the heat from the hot tub is good for your brain. So we'll see. Those are a few things that we know. Avoid head trauma, wear your seatbelt, don't take up boxing, don't decide to become a first string player for the Chiefs. You are not Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce. And even if you are that good, as we have seen, they get hurt too sometimes. So avoid head trauma. Somebody in the chat says, does learning new things help your brain? I'd like to say yes, because that's literally my job to tell you that. But yeah, there's a lot of good research that says stretching your brain, learning something new is a good idea. Coming to this class, learning about Alzheimer's, not only are you learning about Alzheimer's, you're maybe learning something you didn't know before, and you're going to share it with somebody else. LEAP is a class that we have. I'll tell you all about that more another time. Kathleen, can you go to the next slide? I have maybe a couple minutes. This will be in the email that you get. If you're interested in signing up to participate in some research, we do pay for some participants. We also know all the stuff that I've told you because of research. Participating in research also can give you access to an MRI that you don't have to pay for. Win-win. MRIs are not cheap. So those are a few reasons to participate in research. You can get our My Alliance newsletter, which for the person who asked about whether learning something new is helpful, every week in that newsletter, I put a brain booster puzzle in it, and I'm convinced that we are all smarter because of it. Sometimes the people get the puzzle and they email me and they tell me that was the hardest puzzle ever and I hate you, and that is okay. Or sometimes they tell me it was too easy, can't win. But we think that that's a good idea. So you'll have this on the slides and my contact information will be there. One more slide, Kathleen. Yes, we have an app because we are very cool at KU. We have an app for dementia, for people who care for someone with dementia, and it's really cool. I'm going to talk more about it in our next couple of sessions, but you can get the app on your device, whether you have an iPhone or something else. You can get the app. It's free. You don't pay anything to download it or use it. And it gives you a lot of guidance on what do I do when my loved one is doing this thing that's really concerning to me. And the app will answer questions for you. If you're not an app person, you can also access it online with just one click. We do have a few printed copies, and Kathleen and Laurel, I will work on getting a couple maybe of those hardbound copies to put in the library if you want. Okay. All right. So don't worry about trying to capture this. It will be on the slides. I think I have one more slide, which is what are we doing next week? Yep. Okay. So next week, why are they acting like this? Behavior and communication challenges. So we'll talk about those. We'll have different slides. We will see whether we're in person or not. I hope so. But we will be on Zoom regardless, whether I'm in person or not, we will also be on Zoom. If you can make it in person, I'd love to see you in person. You need to get out of your house. Don't be cooped up. But I understand if you don't. And then the rest of the slides are just so I remember to put them in there, Kathleen, so you don't have to show those. But we will be meeting for the next 3 Fridays, 1:30 to 3 o'clock. This is probably the best I've ever done. I got through most of what I wanted to say. I have more to say, which I will share over the next few weeks. Thank you for those of you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for the chatters. For the ones I couldn't see, sorry, but thank you for being here. For the ones I could see, thank you. It made me feel like I wasn't just talking to myself, which I do. I'm done. Any questions, feel free. I'm willing to hang out. I know Kathleen said she's got to go.
Yeah. My head is full, as is my heart. Thank you so much for this information. I think it's been a wonderful presentation and so thorough and
Mhm.
hopeful and helpful and hopeless at the same time.
Yeah.
We
I
thank you for
oh,
your help so much. It's been just a great presentation. We hope to see all of you next Friday here in the auditorium so we can see your sparkly pants.
That's
So,
right.
okay, so please don't wash them, put them away, and we'll watch them next week. Thank you everybody for coming
Perfect.
today.
Laura, one question. I assume when this is on YouTube, you'll tell me or you'll tell us, so
yeah.
we'll be able to
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah, we'll
Right.
send out the slides and the YouTube link and all that kind of stuff all
Great.
at once.
Okay. So when you have access to my contact information, feel free to email me or call me if
Okay.
you want to. If you have any questions or suggestions for like, you could talk more about whatever, and I'll do my best. Okay.
And
We're
I
getting
guess I'll
several
add,
clapping hands. So
yes,
thank you
Oh,
so
one
much.
last thing. If you have not registered for next week's session, if you could just go on the library website and do that. That way we know how many chairs to set up.
Right.
So that would be lovely. And if you don't, if you forget, don't worry about it. We can
We'll
find a
still
chair
let you
for
know,
you.
right? And I'm gonna bring some printed material next week.
Okay,
So that also lets me know how much to bring.
exactly.
Perfect.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
Thank you everyone for coming
Yeah,
today.
thank you. Thank you
It's
so
been
much, Kelly.
amazing.
This is
Thank you,
excellent.
Kelly. Wow.
Alrighty, bye-bye. Let's see.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.